Y'all, you know that kind of quiet that isn't really quiet? The one that happens at the sink when the day's gone sideways and you're just standing there, hands in warm water, watching soap bubbles catch the light. That's where I first learned mindfulness. Not from a guru, not on a yoga mat, just a sink full of dishes and a mind that wouldn't stop running. They tell you to quiet your mind, but mine never did. So I stopped fighting it, and instead I started listening. Sometimes the loudest rooms in our lives are the ones inside us, and sometimes the best thing we can do is set down the sponge, look at the foam, and remember, there's beauty, even in the cleanup. Welcome to Human Beings Radio, a little garden for the mind, body, and spirit. Some days you bloom, some days you just hold the soil together. Either way, you're still growing. When I was little, my grandmother used to hum while she cooked. Not a song you'd recognize, just a tune that wandered the way her hands did. It rose and fell with the rhythm of stirring, the scrape of a wooden spoon, the hiss of something bubbling on the stove. When I asked her once why she hummed, she said it kept her thoughts company. I didn't understand that for years. Back then I thought grown-ups were just born calm. Turns out most of them were just keeping time with the chaos. Decades later, standing here in my own kitchen with 2 kids asleep upstairs and the day still humming in my head, I caught myself doing it. That same tune, that same sway of shoulders, the same way of settling down through sound. And I realized, for the first time all day, I wasn't replaying conversations or rewriting things I wish I'd said. I wasn't sprinting ahead into tomorrow's worries. I was just there, elbow deep in work, kitchen work, the rhythm of rinse, stack, rinse, keeping time with my breath. That's mindfulness. Not fancy, not still, just present. We were sold mindfulness like a luxury product. Spa music, a cushion, a perfect cross-legged silhouette against the sunset. But most of us do not live in monasteries. We live in kitchens. We live in traffic, in shift work, in houses where the laundry never ends. We live in motion. And when we try to freeze that motion to force stillness, the body doesn't thank us for it. It panics. Because for most of us, silence used to mean danger. It meant someone was angry. It meant a door was about to slam or a shoe was about to drop. So when the world goes quiet, our nervous system flinches. That's not weakness. That's history talking. Neuroscience calls it the default mode network, the part of the brain that narrates, plans, replays. It's the voice that keeps running when the room goes still, when we bring our attention to sensation. The slip of water, the smell of soap, the shine on a bubble. A different circuit takes over, the salience network. That's the body saying, I've got this, let me drive for a while. That handoff between story and sensation is the heartbeat of mindfulness. Awareness moving from yesterday or someday back into this second. We make mindfulness sound like a skill, but it's more like a remembering. Remembering that your body already knows how to be here. It's your mind that keeps leaving the room. Mindfulness isn't about silencing that mind. It's about noticing when it's wandered off and calling it back without shame. That kindness, not the focus, not the stillness, the kindness is the medicine. Each time you return, you retrain the alarm system that once learned to expect danger in the quiet, but now every gentle return is a message. The danger's over. You can rest now. I used to think drifting off during prayer was a failure of faith. Turns out the coming back was the faith, the small, persistent act of return. One night, I tried one of those guided silent retreats on YouTube, 15 minutes of sitting. By minute 3, I was rearranging my pantry in my head. By minute 5, I was crying and did not know why. That's when it clicked. Silence wasn't peaceful yet because my body didn't trust it. So I stopped trying to bulldoze my way into peace. I started titrating. That's the therapist's word for it. Taking presence in doses my system could handle. Instead of meditation for an hour, I took 5 mindful breaths while the coffee brewed. I watched steam rise off the cup and thought, here I am, right here. Sometimes mindfulness isn't a grand spiritual act. It's the choice to just be a body again. It's feeling your feet hit the floor in the morning and not rushing past the miracle that you woke up. It's realizing you're holding your breath and then choosing to let it go. We think mindfulness means emptiness, but what it means is fullness, full awareness of what's already here. The hum of the fridge, the heartbeat behind your ribs, the weight of the dog leaning against your leg. Mindfulness is the art of being overwhelmed by ordinary grace. Sometimes presence finds me in strange places. Finding my son's hoodie and catching the scent of sunshine from the clothesline. Noticing how small the sleeves look now compared to last year. That ache, that's mindfulness too. Because the moment I notice I'm grieving, I'm also awake to love. Or walking after rain, when the air smells like wet soil and memory. That smell hits the same part of the brain that therapy does, the hippocampus, where memory and meaning meet. That's the science behind nostalgia's calm. It's biology's way of saying, you've survived this season before. If you've ever been told, just meditate, and you felt broken because you couldn't, listen, Bean, you're not broken. Your nervous system just learned vigilance early. You don't need silence, you need safety. And safety often begins in movement. For me, meditation never worked sitting still. But sweeping the porch, washing apples, that's where I found divinity. Because the rhythm made room for breathing. It's prayer disguised as motion. So if stillness scares you, start with rhythm instead. Find a task that sways. Rocking a baby, knitting, stirring a pot, sweeping a floor. And match your breath to that movement. That's mindfulness. That's coming home to the body. You don't need to chase enlightenment. You just need to notice your own aliveness. The miracle of a pulse that's still keeping time, no matter how noisy life gets. You're listening to Human Beings Radio, a little garden for the mind, body, and spirit. If something in today's episode is planting a seed, share it with a friend, or water it a little by visiting humanbeingsradio.com. You'll find show notes, community links, and ways to help this project keep growing. We'll be right back with part 2 in just a sec. The good news is, science has started catching up to what the body's been trying to tell us for centuries. Kindness changes chemistry. When you move your body gently, walk, stretch, sweep, breathe, you activate the insula, the brain's interoceptive hub. the part that tracks that inner weather. It's the system that says, my chest feels tight, or I'm safe right now. When the insula lights up, the amygdala, the alarm bell, quiets down. That's how mindful movement works. It grounds attention in the sensation and tells the brain, we're safe enough to focus on the present. So, when you stop midday to notice the warmth of dishwater or the weight of your own hands, you're not being indulgent. You're retraining your threat system. That's not a metaphor. It's anatomy. Your vagus nerve, that long strand connecting brain to gut to heart, is the body's peacekeeper. Every slow exhale, every soft hum, every act of self-soothing is like a finger pressing reset. That's why breathwork feels sacred. It's a love letter from the body to the brain. There's an old saying from somewhere that the body keeps the score long before the mind learns the rules. When you tense up before the phone rings, that's not superstition. That's neuroception, the body's early warning radar. Mindfulness helps you rewrite that radar's rules. Think of your mind like a forest. Every thought you repeat is a path. Worry becomes a trail that you've worn bare. So easy your feet find it without thinking. When you pause, breathe, redirect, you step off that trail and start cutting a new one through undergrowth. At first, it is clumsy and uncomfortable, but walk it often enough and peace becomes the easier route. Interestingly, MRI studies have shown that consistent mindfulness practice, even 10 minutes a day, builds gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, where regulation and empathy live. Meanwhile, it quiets activity in the amygdala, our fight or flight or freeze center. Less reactivity, more choice. That's neuroplasticity, healing as a habit. I used to think mindfulness was about control. Turns out it's about connection. Control says fix it, but connection just says feel it. And once you let yourself feel, really feel, the body finds its own balance again. One school morning, chaos ruled. Spilled cereal, missing shoes, 2 cranky kids, my heart hammering like I was late for the battlefield. And then I caught myself. One hand on the counter, one on my chest, and I whispered, "You're safe. We're just late." 30 seconds later, my breath matched my voice again. That's mindfulness at work, not enlightenment, just self-regulation. Now, the body doesn't speak English, it speaks sensation. So when you tell yourself calm down, but your shoulders are still up by your ears, the body doesn't buy it. But roll those shoulders down. Take one deep exhale longer than your inhale, and the vagus nerve hears that language loud and clear. You don't train your mind to be empty. You train it to be kind. And kindness changes chemistry. When you say something gentle to yourself, like, "Hey, it's okay. I'm trying my best. I don't have to have it all figured out." The body releases oxytocin and serotonin. That's safety on a cellular level. When I learned to label my thoughts as weather instead of identity, I stopped drowning in them. Oh, here comes a little drizzle of anxiety instead of "I am anxiety." Language shapes physiology. When you stop being the storm and start being the observer of it or the sky that it rolls through, your nervous system can finally unclench. And multitasking? That's just anxiety wearing lipstick, baby. Every task switch burns fuel. That's why you end the day feeling fried even when you didn't move much. Mindfulness is what happens when you turn off 4 of the 5 radios and finally hear your own song again. If you're listening right now while doing dishes or driving, try this with me. Notice your shoulders. Now drop them. Unclench your jaw. Feel how much energy was hiding in that tension. That's awareness working. Presence doesn't require incense or Sanskrit. You can hum a hymn or a jingle. You can breathe between emails. Mindfulness is any moment you remember you're alive and let that remembering soften you. Now, in recovery circles, and yes, I know I bring up recovery a lot. That's because it lives with me every day. In recovery circles, we say, keep your head where your feet are. Because when the head races ahead, anxiety follows. When it lags behind, regret waits. But when it lines up with your feet, when body and mind stand in the same place, peace finally has somewhere to land. Some days, that peace lasts an hour. Some days, 10 minutes or less. And that's fine. 10 minutes is still rewiring the brain toward ease. The body remembers even brief safety. You don't have to live in the calm. You just have to visit it often enough that it starts recognizing you back. The work isn't chasing serenity. It's planting small flags of awareness throughout your day. A sip of water, a mindful breath, a pause before replying, a hand on your heart that says, hey, we're still here. Mindfulness isn't control. It's friendship with your mind, your body, your moment. And like any friendship, it grows by showing up again and again in all your humanness without needing to be perfect to be present. Mindfulness isn't something that happens to you. It's something you meet halfway. It's the handshake between body and breath. It's the small truce between what hurts and what hopes. It's the moment your shoulders drop without you telling them to, or the first deep sigh that finds you instead of the other way around. You don't master it. You remember it, one ordinary second at a time. And maybe that's the real miracle, that peace doesn't require perfection or stillness or a schedule. It just asks that you look up from the noise long enough to notice you're still here. Dish towel in hand, heart beating steady, life continuing anyway. That noticing is the doorway. And once you walk through, every small thing, the light on the counter, the hum of the fridge, the rhythm of your own breath, that becomes the practice. Now, I think it's the perfect time for a bean break, where we plant a seed, water it, and watch it grow. I like to call this the breathing space between stories, the bean break. It's the place where you stop learning about mindfulness and start doing it for a few breaths. So, here's a tiny practice. If you can, pause whatever else you're doing. Let your shoulders drop. Feel where your body touches the chair, the floor, the steering wheel, whatever's holding you up right now. That's gravity, and it's saying you belong here. Now, find one sound nearby. It could be the hum of the fridge, a car in the distance, your own breath brushing past your lips. Don't chase it, just listen. That's mindfulness. People ask me all the time, how do you start? Start by noticing what you were just about to miss. Presence doesn't have to be grand or holy. It can be the taste of water after a long day, or the smell of bread toasting, or the way sunlight finds the same corner of your living room every morning and stays for just a minute before moving on. That's the universe tapping you on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, still here." Some folks think meditation means emptiness, but the quiet moments are usually the fullest. They're full of details, tiny, merciful evidence that life hasn't gone anywhere. The point isn't to clear your mind, it's to fill it with what's actually here instead of what's imagined. If you do need words to anchor you, try these. Breathe in. This moment belongs to me. And then breathe out. I belong in this moment. It's simple. And that simplicity is what makes it sacred. Because peace was never complicated. We just got busy. So wherever you are right now, let this be your bean break. You don't have to climb a mountain to meet yourself. You can do it in the grocery line, humming under your breath, remembering that being alive is the only mantra you really need. This is Human Beings Radio, stories of growth, grace, and starting over. If these conversations help you steady your roots, pass it along. You can support the garden at buymeacoffee.com/Human Beings Radio, or simply leave a kind comment. Every share, every listen helps light reach a little farther. Now, stay rooted, because our next segment is Everything I Need to Know I Learned from PBS. Everything I Need to Know I Learned from PBS. Today I'm referencing Reading Rainbow, which ran from 1983 to 2006 with host the amazing LeVar Burton. So, thinking about mindfulness, I drift back now to Reading Rainbow. Saturday mornings, the light thin and new, me sitting cross-legged on the carpet with a bowl of cereal that always got soggy by the first commercial break. LeVar Burton would lean toward the camera with that half smile, calm, and say, "You don't have to take my word for it." Even as an older kid, I could feel what that meant. Permission to go find out for myself. He didn't hand you wonder. He pointed toward it and trusted you to walk there. That was the first lesson in attention I really ever got. Look, listen, notice. He made curiosity holy. No noise, no drama, just a man and a stack of library books saying, "What if?" Decades later, when life gets too loud, I still hear that same voice. You don't have to take my word for it. It reminds me that peacefulness isn't about believing in peace. It's about checking for yourself if peace is possible here in this body in this moment. My boys, they grew up with the reruns. They'd roll their eyes at the theme song, but every time it played, they'd sing along anyway. I used to watch them watching. That quiet spell where a story lifts a kid right out of their small world and drops them somewhere else. And I have to think, that's what presence looks like. Total engagement. The kind that doesn't know it's spiritual because it's too busy being alive. LeVar Burton taught us that attention is a form of love. When you look at something fully, a caterpillar, a sentence, a face, you give it dignity. That's mindfulness in practice, giving dignity back to the moment instead of rushing through it. I think about that a lot, maybe, when I catch myself scrolling. How easily we trade wonder for information. And yet every time I put the phone down and look at the real world, the chip mug, the dog tilting his head at me, the steam on the window, I can feel the same magic Reading Rainbow gave me years ago. The world is still full of things worth seeing. We just have to remember how to look. So here's my grown-up version of LeVar's line. You don't have to take my calm for it. Go find your own. Taste it in your coffee. Hear it in the rain. Try presence the way he told us to try books. Not because someone said it's good for you, but because you might discover a world you didn't know was waiting. So let's jump into this greenhouse journal I've got going. It was supposed to be started as a way to track my herbs, by the way, and now it's just a record of my inner weather. And lately, I've noticed the forecast keeps changing by the hour. Some mornings, the entry is simple. All is well, basil thriving. Other days, it's longer and tangled and more honest. Can't tell if I'm tired or sad. Watered anyway. That's the new rule in my garden, by the way, and in my mind. Water anyway. Tend anyway. You don't have to feel hopeful to keep caring. I've been rereading a few pages today before recording. One page says, "Today I didn't add anything, but I sat next to the notebook for 10 minutes and that felt like tending." And that's it. That's the whole practice. Sit near what you love until the frost of avoidance begins to melt. Another day, I did draw doodles instead of writing. Just little leaves to mark good moments that I didn't have words for. And that counts too. Anything that keeps you in conversation with your own growth is valid. When I look back through my early entries, I can see where I was still trying to make mindfulness a to-do list. Breathe, journal, stretch, meditate. Now the pages read more like letters to myself. Hey, you're doing better than you think. Maybe rest is productive. My favorite one that I found this morning was, sunlight hit the countertop just right today. Mindfulness isn't about documenting perfection. It's about documenting participation. It's proof that you showed up for your own life. And just like plants, not all growth is visible. Some roots go down before anything pushes up. If your journal looks quiet, that might mean you're rooting. I keep a line from last week starred in the margin. The mint doesn't apologize for taking up space. I try to remember that when I start shrinking again. So here's your gentle homework. If you've started your own greenhouse journal, flip through it tonight. Notice patterns. Where do you tend to bloom? When do you forget to water? Don't judge, just notice. And if you haven't started one, grab a scrap of paper and write today's date. Then write one sensory detail about right now, what you hear, smell, or see. Congratulations, that's your first entry. You've begun. Now, don't forget to drop by humanbeingsradio.com or our Facebook community and let us know how it's coming along. Be well, Beans. Y'all take care and notice where you're at. Now, because we're on mindfulness today, there's something I want to talk about. When I think about mindfulness, I don't picture incense or temples or perfect stillness. I picture my granddaddy's workbench. It sat in like a dim corner of a lean-to shed that always smelled like cedar shavings and gun oil and summer heat. A single bulb hung above it, swaying when the door slammed. That light didn't illuminate much, just enough to catch the slow glint of his hunting knife, a curl of steel filings gathering like dust at his feet. You could hear the rhythmic scrape of the whetstone long before you saw him. A rasp, a pause, a breath, and another rasp. He didn't rush. He didn't talk. He just worked the blade in small circles, the same pattern he'd learned from his father, who'd learned it from his. He used to say a knife wasn't finished when it was sharp. It was finished when it could be trusted, and trust took time. When I was a kid, I'd sit and watch. He'd test the edge against his thumb, wipe the steel with an old rag, then lift it to the light as if it were a question he was still answering. That's how I learned the first language of attention. Not from books or sermons, but from the way his hands honored what they touched. The smell of that place lives in me even now. Warm iron, pine pitch, tobacco, sweat, and a hint of something sweet, honeysuckle, that crept through the cracks in the siding. Dust motes floated in the sunbeam that cut across the bench, and I remember thinking they looked like little spirits, patient, suspended, not in a hurry to be anything else. I didn't know it then, but I was learning how presence feels, the air still except for the movement that matters. When I try to explain mindfulness to people who think it's too abstract, I tell them it's like sharpening a blade. You can't force it, the steel will fight you. You go slow, steady, letting the edge find itself again. You learn to feel the difference between resistance and readiness. You listen for the sound of friction changing, a whisper that says, "Enough for now." That's not enlightenment. That's just awareness made visible. Now, Granddaddy never used the word mindfulness, but he did call it quiet work. Said that every good thing takes shape in silence first. Tools, temper, even people. He believed that noise was for those who hadn't learned to trust their hands yet. You could see that same quiet work when he'd walk out to check the livestock. Slow, deliberate, every step measured. He moved like the earth had agreed to hold him only if he treated it with respect. The animals knew his rhythm. Cows would lift up their heads and snort and settle again. The old mare would lean into his touch when he brushed her neck. He talked to them under his breath, not words so much as tone, a low hum like he used at the sharpening bench. I think that was his meditation, long before any of us had the vocabulary for it. The smell of hay and leather, the creak at the barn door, the hiss of dust rising when sunlight hit the floorboards, every sense was awake out there. He didn't separate the sacred from the ordinary. He just lived as if the two had never been apart. That's one of the parts I miss most about him, the holiness that he brought to the everyday. As I got older, of course, basically from when I could walk and hold anything, I had to be helping him. Life on a farm, you know. My job would be to hand him tools, or he'd let me hold the whetstone steady. He'd nod when I got it right, and grunt softly when I didn't. There was never praise or scolding, just presence. One afternoon, curious, I asked him how he knew when a blade was done. He smiled and wiped his hands on his jeans and said, "When it stops asking to be changed." I think about that all the time. How many times I've pushed myself or someone else past readiness, mistaking rest for laziness, silence for lack. Mindfulness, as I've come to understand it, is the art of knowing when to stop sharpening, when to let things just be sharp enough for the day. After he passed, I inherited a lot of his knives. The handles are all worn smooth as river stone. When I got them, I examined them all and Press my thumbs against their edges, all of them still keen, still balanced. Years later, those knives remember his hands better than I do. That's what attention leaves behind, the kind of imprint that time can't blunt. Now, on the days when my mind races or world feels like static, I pull one of those knives out and just hold them. I don't cut anything. I just turn it in the light and trace the grain of the handle with my thumb. Heavy, grounded, human-sized. Sometimes I can almost smell the shed again. That quiet heat, that particular peace that comes from working with your whole self engaged. It reminds me that mindfulness doesn't live in the head, it lives in the hands. It's tactile, textured. It's the way you stir soup or fold laundry or sand wood. Fully present, nowhere else to be. We talk so much about awareness as thought, but my granddaddy taught it as weight and warmth and rhythm. The sound of a grindstone, the heat of a forge, the smell of metal turning bright. He didn't need mantras. He had muscle memory. That's a kind of prayer too, the kind that says, I'm here, doing what's in front of me, one motion at a time. Sometimes I wonder what he'd think about all this talk about mindfulness. Honestly, I think he'd smile that quiet half smile of his and keep on working. He wouldn't name it. He'd just hand you a knife and say, feel that edge. Took patience to get there. And in that moment, you'd understand everything you needed to know about paying attention. There's a tenderness in labor when it's done with presence, a reverence. You can feel it in any good craft, quilting, cooking, gardening, whittling. You leave a trace of yourself in the thing you tend, and it leaves a trace of calm in you. Maybe that's what mindfulness has always been trying to tell us, that what we touch touches us back. On quiet evenings when I walk in the garden rows or stack dishes after dinner, I sometimes hear the same rasp, pause, breath rhythm from the shed. It lives in me now, that steady pulse of care. I catch myself slowing down, watching light slip across surfaces, listening for the tiny cues that say, enough. It's the same language, just spoken in new hands. If mindfulness has a lineage, that's mine. Born not from monasteries, but from porches, barns, and workbenches. From the smell of oil and iron and dirt. From people who knew that attention is its own kind of love. Maybe you had someone like that too. A grandparent, a teacher, a neighbor, who showed you how to be still by doing something real. If so, that's your inheritance, the memory of presence. It's worth more than gold or doctrine. Because here's what I've learned. The quiet work never ends. There will always be something to sharpen, something to mend, something to tend with both hands and your whole heart. And maybe that's enough. To live like my granddaddy did, steady and attentive, trusting that care itself is the practice. He used to finish a day's work, wipe his tools down, set them down on the bench. He'd turn off the light, tip his hat toward the door and say, good enough for tonight. Maybe mindfulness is just that, knowing when to lay the knife down, when to trust the day's edge as it is, and when to let the darkness do its quiet work. Now let's go on to Blue Book bindings. I lean on the Blue Book a lot. It was written for alcoholics, but the truth is, it's a guide for staying human in a noisy world. Its language may talk about drink, but its wisdom speaks to thought, emotion, and the ways we all try to escape our own minds. Today I'm really thinking about step 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 10. Every time I read it, I think, well, that's mindfulness in plain English. It doesn't say achieved enlightenment. It doesn't say graduated from being human. It doesn't even promise that we'll always get it right the next time. It just says continued. It says noticed. It said admitted. And if you listen close, you can almost hear the breath between the lines, that gentle pause that separates reaction from repair. That's the rhythm of awareness. Notice, pause, repair, repeat. The same way you breathe without thinking, the same way the tide pulls back before returning. I used to think taking inventory meant judgment, a moral spreadsheet of right and wrong, a cold little accounting of failures. For years, that's exactly how I used it. Every night was a tribunal. What I said wrong, who I disappointed, how I could have been more patient, more perfect. It wasn't mindfulness. It was self-flagellation with a clipboard. But slowly, through recovery, through therapy, through getting tired of being at war with myself, I realized taking inventory isn't punishment. It's tending. It's walking through the garden of your day with a flashlight, not to shame what's wilted, but to water what's still trying. Now, before I fall asleep, I ask a softer question. Where did I leave my presence today? Sometimes the answer is sweet. I listened all the way through my friend's story without glancing at my phone. Sometimes it's humbling. I snapped at the person I love most because I was running on fumes. But either way, the noticing is the healing. It turns regret into recognition, and recognition into readiness to try again. We like to imagine mindfulness as serenity. Candlelight, soft music, everything aligned and peaceful. But more often, it's an apology with a heartbeat behind it. It's saying, I drifted. It's saying, I forgot myself for a minute, but I came back. It's not a mountaintop posture. It's a kitchen table confession. That's step 10. That's recovery. That's mindfulness with work boots on. Maybe that's why it works, because it asks for effort, not perfection. It invites you to show up dusty and honest, to admit you're learning this being human thing as you go. Step 10 is the promise that progress is circular, not linear. You don't graduate from awareness. You practice it, like a craftsperson sanding rough edges one more time. When I look back, I can see how many years I spent trying to control the narrative, to be the calm one, the strong one, the helper, the teacher. I thought mastery would protect me from pain. But mindfulness has softened all that. It let me become a student again. It said, you get to make mistakes and still belong. That sentence alone restructured my nervous system. Now, when I catch myself mid-spiral, criticizing, comparing, replaying, I pause long enough to ask, what am I trying to control that doesn't belong to me? Half the time, the answer is everything, and that's fine. Awareness doesn't demand immediate change. It just opens the door. There's a story I sometimes tell myself at night when I can't sleep. It's not a fable or a quote from a guru. It's just me whispering to myself. Even the earth needs winter. Rest isn't a failure. That's my inventory prayer. It reminds me that dormancy is still a part of growth, and that recovery and mindfulness share the same soil: humility, repetition, and willingness. Because what is mindfulness if not the willingness to see clearly, to look without flinching, to stay with the truth long enough for compassion to grow around it. And what is recovery if not the decision to try again, to keep walking the same circle of effort and forgiveness until it starts to feel like grace instead of penance? Step 10 is a gardener's step. You go out every day and check what's growing, what's struggling, what needs pruning. You don't yell at the plant for wilting. You adjust the light. That's how I take inventory now, with curiosity instead of condemnation. So, tonight, if you're listening before bed, try your own. Not a performance, not a punishment, just a quiet checking in. Ask yourself 3 questions, slow and true. What went well? What felt hard? What still needs my care? If it helps, whisper the answers out loud, or write them on a scrap of paper, or just think of them as you wash your face. Then let yourself rest without fixing a single thing. Because awareness itself is already the first repair, and sometimes the only repair needed is to let the day be done. Close the book. Turn off the light. And my beautiful bean, let grace do the rest while you sleep. If what you've heard today feels like it met you where you are, take a breath and help it find the next person who might need it. That's how Human Beings Radio grows. Every time you share an episode, leave a kind review, or tell a friend, hey, listen to this, you help this little garden reach new listeners who could use a bit of comfort or company. Those small gestures add up to something real. You can find full episodes, transcripts, and behind-the-scenes updates at humanbeingsradio.com. And if you'd like to help keep the mics warm and the tea poured, you can visit buymeacoffee.com/humanbeingsradio to chip in or join the Bean Patch as a sustaining supporter. Every dollar goes right back into production and the creative work that keeps these conversations blooming. We also have a Human Beings Radio Facebook group, a gentle place to share thoughts, connect with others, and keep growing together in real time. Whether you stop by to listen, chat, or just read along quietly, you're a part of the community. Thanks for being here, for showing up, and for helping this project keep growing. Now, let's get back to the show. Now, let's take a little bitty pause for a little bit of whimsy for the weary. Did you ever notice how mindfulness sometimes sneaks in dressed like silliness? Like you're trying to have a deep, meaningful pause, and instead your cat sneezes in the exact rhythm of your breathing exercise. Suddenly you're laughing too hard to be enlightened. Well, that's it. That's mindfulness. The truth is, not every sacred moment looks like candlelight and calm. Sometimes it looks like burnt toast that is somehow shaped like a heart, or the sound that your refrigerator makes when it sighs, like it's saying, "Same, buddy." Sometimes it's catching your reflection in the microwave door and realizing you've been talking to yourself out loud for 10 minutes, and it's fine. It's company. I mean, I've decided that mindfulness has to have a sense of humor. It likes to hide in the cracks of ordinary life, waiting for us to unclench long enough to laugh. Because laughter is presence. It's the body's little rebellion against fear, a reminder that joy doesn't ask for permission to exist. So, here's your practice for today. Find one thing that makes you smile and then just let it take up space. Like a ridiculous song, or a dog wearing a sweater, or a toddler explaining why toast is bread that reached its destiny. That counts. That's all it takes. The world can stay complicated, and it will. But for this moment, just let it be a little absurd. Take a deep breath, snort laugh if you need to, and let the day wobble back toward wonder. Because sometimes the holiest thing you can do, the only divinity you can find in the mundane, is to spill a little coffee, giggle that it made a funny shape. Just remember that you're alive. So, Beans, whatever you do today, have a laugh. Okay, Beans. I think it's about time for my final thoughts from the kitchen. And what my thoughts are right now is that quiet doesn't really mean empty. You know, by the time night finds kitchen, the house finally exhales. It's that soft sigh after a long day, the kind that settles into the floorboards, into the walls, into the rhythm of everything that's survived the noise. The sink, once a battlefield of dishes and soap bubbles and half-finished meals, becomes a mirror again. The light goes low, collecting itself in corners. Little pools of amber reflection in the curve of a mug, a streak on the countertop, the metal edge of a faucet. And somewhere beneath it all, you can hear the clock ticking, steady, faithful, unhurried. That sound used to make me restless, but now it feels like company. Proof that time hasn't left me behind, just gently asked me to slow down enough to feel it passing. For a long time, that quiet unnerved me. I'd fill it with TV noise, with scrolling, with the hum of overthinking. Silence felt too much like absence, the kind of stillness that made old echoes louder. But now I know better. Now I know the quiet isn't a void. It's an invitation. It's the doorway between what's been done and what can finally be released. When you step through it slowly enough, you realize peace doesn't come to you. It waits inside of you, for the day to end. The kitchen has really always been the truest chapel that I know. It's where mindfulness meets mercy. You stand there in the ruins of an ordinary day, crumbs, smudges, dishes, echoes, and realize you're still here, still breathing, still capable of care. That's grace in its most domestic form. You don't need candles or incense. You just need a dish towel and a heartbeat. Sometimes I'll lean against the counter, the laminate cool under my palms, and ask myself softly, what did today teach me? Today taught me that burnt toast still counts as breakfast. Today taught me that the dog forgives me faster than I forgive myself. I was today years old when I learned that breath always comes back. I found out today that the world kept turning even when I didn't keep up. Those lessons stack quietly like dishes drying in the rack, unglamorous, necessary, a record of life's ordinary sacredness. Some nights the kitchen answers back with silence, and even that feels like wisdom. Not every day hands you a moral or a revelation. Some just hand you another sunrise, and maybe that's the point. To live enough days that the living itself becomes the teacher. If you're ending your day listening to this, I want to tell you something simple but true. Mindfulness isn't a single act of focus. It's a lifelong conversation with your own aliveness. It's the art of showing up again and again, not as a saint, but as a person who keeps choosing awareness over autopilot. Some days it whispers. Some days it hides under exhaustion, but it never leaves. Even when you forget it, mindfulness remembers you. It's that moment between inhale and exhale that waits patiently for your attention to return. Tomorrow will bring noise. There'll be emails, errands, and tiny heartbreaks disguised as inconveniences. There'll be coffee stains and traffic lights and the low hum of being needed. But tonight, right now, there's this. The steady breath of appliances. The heartbeat you didn't have to ask for. The miracle of being a witness to your own life right here in its unedited form. Quiet doesn't mean empty. It means ready. Ready for rest. Ready for tomorrow's small miracles. Ready to wake up and hum while the coffee brews, remembering that peace was never something you had to earn. It was always something you could just notice. The truth is, you've already done enough tending for today. You've held the world up in your hands, the people, the plans, the ache of wanting to get it all right. You've carried it as far as you could. Now it's the earth's turn to hold you. So, wash one more plate if you need to. Wipe down the counter. Turn off the light. But leave one lamp glowing if it comforts you. A soft promise that morning will come back around. Step away then, knowing that everything you've done today is already composting into something fertile. Even the hard parts, even the regrets. The garden, inside and out, knows how to grow while you sleep. Let it. Let the night do the tending. Let the quiet do the healing. Let yourself be the soil for once, not the gardener. Rest isn't lazy, it's preparation. Stillness isn't absence, it's germination. And you, weary, wonderful being, are still part of that cycle. You don't have to bloom tonight. You just have to breathe. So, breathe. And when you wake, start again with clean light, warm coffee, and that hum your grandmother might have called prayer. Because peace was never far away. It was just waiting for you to notice. You've been listening to Human Beings Radio, a little garden for the mind, body, and spirit. If something from today's episode found a place to grow in you, share it with someone who might need a little bit of light. You can find show notes, upcoming topics, and ways to support the project at humanbeingsradio.com. And if you'd like to help keep this garden blooming, visit buymeacoffee.com/Human Beings Radio. Follow along on your favorite platform, leave a kind review if you can, find us on all the socials, and come back next time. We'll keep tending together. Until then, stay rooted, seek light, and remember, even after the hardest rain, the garden always finds its way back to green. Writing, graphics, and all the technical stuff was me, Mira Crowe, and the original music was my kid, John Henry. And before we close, a quick note. I'm not a therapist, doctor, or licensed counselor, just a fellow traveler sharing stories, research, and reflections that have helped me along the way. Nothing here is meant to replace professional, medical, or mental health advice. If you're struggling, please reach out to someone qualified, a doctor, therapist, or counselor who can walk that road with you. You don't have to do any of this alone. Help really is out there, and you deserve it.